Hello and welcome to my first ever Onshape tutorial. Today I want to talk about mate connectors, and the reason that I'm doing this in the first place is because there's quite a bit of stuff out there on YouTube, but quality isn't always up there, and a lot of those tutorials don't necessarily showcase best practices as much as they should, and or don't explain things that clearly. So I was going to try to do better, hopefully. We'll see how that goes. I'm picking mate connectors because they are a unique thing to Onshape and generally not well understood, I think, for anyone that's started using other CAD packages. They get by, but it does take a while to really understand them in depth and make the most of them. So, without any further introduction, let's just jump right in. One of the key topics or key things that you need to understand is the difference between an implicit and an explicit mate connector. So an implicit mate connector is something that you can pick whenever you are selecting a mate connector. So these are all these points and squares, and depending on what you're mousing over, you get all these different snap points that you can pick as an implicit mate connector. And also, what should be noted, very useful if you don't know it already, is if you hold on the shift key, it locks kind of the thing that you were on, so it helps you pick a specific one. On here on that face that I was locked on, if I release shift, it will start moving again. But if you want an edge, hold shift, and then you can get close to the endpoint without unintentionally jumping anywhere else. So these are all implicit mate connectors, and they're basically everywhere. Now, an explicit mate connector, this is how you create them in a Part Studio. Basically starts from an implicit one, but once you create it, it shows up in your feature tree and you can keep reusing it. So it's more intentional and permanent. So it will always be there, you can keep using it. And of course, you do have a whole bunch of options for manipulating them. A key switches the Z axis, and Q rotates it in 90-degree increments, but you can also realign the primary axis, which is Z. Pick whatever reference you have, and it will snap that to your reference. And the secondary axis is the X axis. So if you pick something at a weird angle, it will make this parallel to whatever your reference is that you pick in here. And mate connectors need to be tied to a part, or at least a surface. And you can also add offsets to locate it in some place. So that's the difference between an implicit and an explicit mate connector. So I have these two parts, one that I'm calling fixed, one I'm calling moving, and they each have a mate connector assigned to them. I use the midpoint of the two halves of my sketch block for that, but it doesn't really matter what I use for what I'm gonna do today. So there's this one is the fixed, and this one is the moving part. And I guess I should, well, I could rename them, but might as well. Best practices. Renaming things does help keep track of what's going on. So now if we go to an assembly, I am going to insert these two. And if I expand the Part Studio, I have these two parts that are in here, but I want both of them anyway, so I can just click once on here, and it will insert both of them into my assembly. Now, right away, I'm going to fix the one that is called fixed, and this one is movable. And you can see they have the mate connectors listed in here. So one important thing to understand related to implicit and explicit mate connectors is, let's say you wanted to do a fasten mate, and I am going to use implicit mate connectors. I'll hide the current ones, which is the shortcut K to toggle mate connectors. So I'll create a fasten mate, and I will say attach the corner of the M. So here I'm going to use the shift key to make it easier to grab exactly what I want. Here and here. So this is a fasten mate. And what it does effectively is it actually creates two explicit mate connectors. Now this is not actually explained at all in the training, but that's what happens here. You can also create explicit mate connectors in the assembly, even though I don't usually do it a lot, because usually it's just better to do it in your part if you know you're gonna need one. The only real use case is if you want to put something centered in between two entities when you're trying to mate something centered between two things. So the only real case where I've used it in assemblies is just say I want something between here and that face, and that's kind of the only way to pick that, because there's no implicit mate connector there. So that would be a case where you would create an explicit mate connector in the assembly, and it is listed here by itself under mate features. But if you go back to the mate, and there's many different ways to do the same thing, really. This is, well, actually it's not the same because I didn't pick the corner. You can use space to clear your selections, but this is the same as what I had earlier, just picking different things. But the key point is that under here are two explicit mate connectors. You can even show them. So this one belongs to the M, and it highlights the M when I mouse over it, and this one belongs to the F, and it highlights as well. And obviously they're right on top of each other, so you can't tell which one you're looking at. But important concept, creating a mate creates, when you pick implicit mate connectors, it creates explicit mate connectors here. And you can actually reuse them. So if I make a copy of this, I could say I want this, and I want to mate, let's do something else, let's do a slider. I'm gonna pick this, and then this guy, and I've actually used this explicit mate connector in this new mate. And you can see it because here it only lists the one that it created, part of my second M. And the first one is the exact same that is here. And an important concept as well is what this means is you can, after you've created the mate and these are created, you can go back and edit them. So you can add offsets in here. Just say I'm going to move it minus 10 millimeters in Y. So it's like now 10 millimeters down from that original point. And now it's here and it's spaced out the M. So that's an important thing to understand, is that these mate connectors are explicit mate connectors that you can edit just the same as one that you created separately. And they're created automatically by the mate feature. And when you create a mate between existing explicit mate connectors, there's nothing under that mate. So let's say I was to suppress this. Now I've got, let's just say I'm gonna do, let's do something else just for fun. Revolute between here and here, which are both explicit mate connectors. well, now that Revolut mate does not expand, it has not created any mate connectors because it only used existing ones. So that's what that means when you have 1, 2, or none, no mate connectors. That's because they're explicit versus implicit. That's probably enough for today already. I will do a next chapter where I will go over what the different mate types are and start going over some more tips and tricks on how to leverage all of this and what it means in practice. Hope you found this helpful. If you did, you know what to do and click so you know when the next chapter's out, and hopefully you have a good one.